If you're in a place where it is appropriate and comfortable for you to do so, please close your eyes and begin to take a few slow, long, deep, relaxing breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. With every inhale, you feel more peace and light entering your body. With every exhale, you allow yourself to relax and just let gravity take away all tension and anything you do not want. Inhaling peace and exhaling letting go. We picture ourselves on top of a beautiful mountain in the center of a circular grove of trees. In the center of our grove, a bonfire blazes forth, lighting us and the grove up with a sacred golden light. We recognize that this is the light of perfect love and perfect trust, and it burns away everything that is not like itself, leaving us pure and clear. Into this sacred space, we invite the presence of our Divine Father and Mother. We also invite the presence of our guides, our teachers, and our angels. We dedicate the time that we spend together to each other and to them, and we ask that we be guided and led as we walk upon the way, becoming happier, more peaceful, more gentle, more prosperous, more healthy, and more loving people. Thank you very much. If it's appropriate for you to do so out loud, you can join me in saying the words, "Blessed be." I got a wonderful question, and I thought we would talk about what they asked today. It was on YouTube, and they said, I oftentimes see people saying that you need to take real-world action for your spells to work. For example, if you want more money, you need to work on opening paths for the money to reach you. What are your thoughts on this? Your example here of a new computer, he or she is describing a lecture that I gave. I can see how maybe asking around your friends, etc., if they have an old computer they are getting rid of would help, but I don't see how a brand new one could just land in your lap. Joseph Murphy and Neville Goddard make it sound as if anything you desire can come to you through this formula without really doing anything, and an opportunity will present itself to fulfill your desire. But then I see conflicting information saying you need to take real-world action to back up your spell work. I find this a real stumbling block in my mind as I don't know which way to move. Any advice? Well, that's a very good question, and I think that it deserves some attention. If you didn't need to work a spell to get something, then why would you bother? I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into working magic, right? You have to learn the craft. You have to build your skill set. You have to build your power bodies. You have so much work that you have to do in order to work magic. If you're working magic and then you're just going to go ahead and make it happen without magic, why bother with the magic? It's like if you want a computer and all that it's going to take is for you to ask around for your friends to see if they have a computer that they don't want, and that's all that it needs, then why bother with a spell? I mean, it's just a lot of work for nothing, if you ask me. On one hand, I agree that you do need to have real-world action. As they used to say, put feet to your prayers. You need to actually do the work that you need to do. Action needs to sometimes be following up your spell work. But at the same time, if you're simply just going to make it happen, why bother with a spell? Why bother? So both are true. Both sides of the argument are true. I've done experiments with magic where I say I'm going to do spells on this thing, and I'm not going to do any follow-up. I'm just going to do the spell, and I'm not going to do any follow-up, just to see, just to experiment. And I recommend doing that too, especially if you already have a track record. If I wouldn't do that when you're first building your faith, when you're first starting out. But if you have some experience in magic, try that. Just say, okay, I'm going to do this just as an experiment. I'm going to do a spell, and I'm not going to do any follow-up. And I've had some pretty amazing results with that, where I didn't have any follow-up. I just did the spell. I did everything you're supposed to do, including forget about it. And then poof, it shows up. But that's not always appropriate. Sometimes the spell does require some follow-up on your part in the so-called real world action. So what do you do? How do you know? First and foremost, it's important that if action is to be taken, that you take inspired action. If action is to be taken, it should be inspired action. In other words, you're not going to decide, because if your decisions were all that it took, then why would you need magic? If I was taking a series of actions that would provide a specific result for me, and I didn't need to do any kind of magical operation, I would just do that series of steps and get the result that I need and save myself a lot of time and trouble with magic. But a lot of times with magic, what we're trying to do is press on our sphere of influence to expand what we think we're capable of, to go a little beyond what our own personal efforts could yield as far as results are concerned. So in that regard, rather than me deciding what I needed to do in order to make the spell work, that's when working with your spirit guide or your inner guide comes into play, because you work the spell and then you listen and you ask and you're guided to take specific steps when necessary or not. Sometimes you'll say, should I go and, follow up on this? And you'll get a very clear sense, no, don't do anything. Don't say anything. Just leave it alone. In which case you just don't do anything, you don't say anything, and you leave it alone. And oftentimes things happen in ways that you weren't expecting. Sometimes in your meditation, you'll get a very clear hit, and sometimes without even a meditation, especially if you're meditating on a regular basis, that inner voice will come and say, you got to go to blah, blah, blah. You got to do such and such. And you think that's weird, but you do it, and that's a way in which your spell is wanting to manifest. But sometimes your own actions that you would normally take are destructive. A lot of times the ways that you would think to create this change for yourself that you're desiring, for instance, your new computer, they're destructive. They are counter to what your spell's energy is, just because we don't have the vantage point that the spirit world does. We don't see everything like spirit does. We don't know what's coming. We don't know who's in operation, in what place and what time. We don't know anything other than what's in front of our face. So when you're working magic, you're asking for powers that are beyond what your physical senses can dictate to you to assist in getting you where you want to be. And so if you're going to be doing magic, then you need to allow yourself to have magic help you, rather than saying, well, that was an interesting exercise. Now I'm just going to do my own thing my own way anyway. I'm just going to go make it happen. That's not magical, is it? If you're just going to go make it happen, don't bother. Really, just don't bother with the spell. It's all kinds of extra work for no reason. If you're just going to go try to make it happen, don't bother. But if there's really a need for magic, it's usually because it's something that seems a little bit beyond what you're capable of. So you're going to go ahead and work a spell for it. In which case, you have to be open to the fact that the manifestation of that spell can happen in very unusual ways, very strange ways. Something can just come out of nowhere. We always, say, don't do a money spell and then just sit around and expect a basket of money to show up on your doorstep. That's true, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that your past understanding about how to make money is where you need to be putting your energy either. Instead, what you need to be doing is allowing yourself to be open and receptive to the guidance as it comes, so that the spell that you have cast can manifest in its most perfect way. And there's an interesting balance that you need, and you get better and better at it as you go. Because on one hand, as I think we talked about last week, you have to let go of the spell. You got to get to the point where you don't even remember you cast it. It's just like it's gone. And at the same time, you have to be open and willing to be directed into taking inspired action when necessary. And that's why when you're working with a guide, an inner guide, or a sense of a guidance system, that you're open to being prompted and directed and guided and led into taking action sometimes that doesn't always make sense. Because when you're working magic, what's different than you just doing what you think you need to do in order to get that computer, when you're working magic, then all of a sudden so-and-so from another country happens to say such and such to somebody who is a friend of yours who knows of a thing over maybe 2 or 3 cities away from you that's happening where they were having a program where they're getting rid of extra computers that you would have never known about. You would have never known about that thing, except for that it had this real convoluted way of getting to you from another country to another person to a person that knows that person who happens to say, oh, did you hear about this program? When you're working magic, you're putting things into operation that are going to help you in ways that you couldn't have helped yourself without it. Be careful of looking at magic as just an exercise. Oh, it's just an exercise that's just getting my mind focused. I'm going to just make it happen anyway. There's no real magic is kind of what that says to me when I see things like, if you want more money, you need to work on opening paths for the money to reach you. Well, if you knew how to open up paths for the money to reach you, you wouldn't have needed the spell. If you knew how to open those paths, you wouldn't need the spell. But the spell is opening up those paths, and those paths are making themselves known to you in ways that you couldn't have figured out on your own without it, in ways that might not even have been available to you had you not cast that spell. There's got to be a sense of the magical and the mystical even after the spell is cast and even after you've forgotten it, to be open and receptive to manifestations occurring in ways that are different than something that is in the norm of how you would normally try to make something happen. Very often people will turn to magic because they need a specific thing, and then they'll cast the spell, and then they'll go try to make it happen. What that's doing is it's kind of killing the spell. If you were just going to go make it happen, you wouldn't have needed the spell. So since you're casting the spell, it means that your ability to make it happen by yourself without magic is not quite enough. So allow the spell to work. It's sort of like planting a seed and then going and buying a plant. I'm going to plant a seed and so that I can nurture this thing. And then I plant the seed and I'm like, well, I'll just buy a plant already grown. Or saying, I want to paint a picture, and then you get all the stuff ready for painting the picture and you say, I'm just going to buy a painting. What's the point? What's the point if you're going to cast a spell and you're going to do magic if you already can do that thing all by yourself without the magic? Taking inspired action is sometimes necessary, but that's very different than you having your own plans in place, doing the spell and doing your own thing anyway. It's very different. When you do a spell and you forget about it, you know that you want this thing, and you do a spell for it, and then you forget about it, your guide will keep coming back to you with ideas of things to do that you may not even. It happens to me all the time. I'll cast a spell, I'll forget about it, I'll be guided and led to do something, and I don't even get that it has anything to do with my spell. And I do those things just because I've conditioned myself to listen to my inner guidance. And I'll do those things thinking, well, for whatever reason, I'm doing these things. And then I realize, oh my gosh, that's how my spell manifested. That's how my spell manifested, is by me following those things. I didn't even see the connection there. So yeah, you do need to follow things up with action sometimes, but it's inspired action. And oftentimes it's action that doesn't even necessarily make sense. And you don't even realize that it has anything to do with your spell. Sometimes the best thing to do after casting a spell, like I said before, is completely forget about it and don't do anything. Because your doing oftentimes is killing it. Your doing is the thing that makes it stop. So if you can forget about it and let it go, sometimes you do get that basket of money on your doorstep. It may not be exactly that, but an opportunity will come your way that you did not expect, that you had no way of knowing was going to come. But had you been out there trying to make it happen, you would have missed that opportunity completely missed that opportunity because you were so intent on making things happen and manifest your certain way. There has to be a balance between letting go, doing follow-up when necessary, but also keeping a very light touch and sometimes keeping an entirely hands-off approach once you've cast a spell. Sometimes a hands-off approach is necessary, especially if your tendency is to muck it up. I know that's my tendency. I'm better than I used to be, but I remember when I used to cast spells, I would think, well, maybe I better do this, maybe I better do that. I wasn't very good at letting it go. I wasn't very good at forgetting about it and just letting it manifest. So I would do the, quote, inspired action, which wasn't really inspired action. It was me interfering with my own spell casting, and I would muck it up. I would mess it up. Luckily, I had a decent teacher, and she would say, I don't know how anything that you do a spell for will manifest because of the way you are, because you always go in there and try to make it work. I want you to get used to casting a spell and forgetting about it and letting it manifest. And that was so hard for me. And it was such an important skill for me to be able to acquire, because that way I was able to get out of my own way. A lot of times that's really all a spell is for, is to get you out of the way. To get you out of the way of its manifestation, because you're the problem. You're the thing that's blocking it. You want that computer? Well, then you got to stop being involved in it. You go ahead and do that spell for the computer, and you get out of the picture completely and let that computer come to you. And what you say is really interesting. I can see how maybe asking around for your friends, et cetera, if they have an old computer they are getting rid of would help. But I don't see how a brand new one could just land in your lap. But see, that's the problem, is you don't see how that could happen. And you've made up your mind and decided that a computer can't find you, that you have to be in charge of the computer. So your spell won't probably work because you don't have that yet, that skill of being able to let it go and release it and put it out of your mind and let it manifest as it will. And that's why sometimes you have to start small when you're first starting out with spellcasting, because your sphere of influence is not that big, magically speaking. Your sphere of influence is a lot bigger for you at that point in regards to what you can do on your own without magic versus what you can do with magic, because of that attitude right there. Like, well, I don't see how that could work. Well, then it won't. It won't be able to work because you are so limited. By what I'm reading there is very, very common, and very practical. But the idea is, well, I don't see how magic could work better than me. Well, then it won't. So that means that your sphere of influence without magic is greater than your sphere of influence with magic. So if magic is something that you're interested in getting better at so that you can expand your overall sphere of influence, then you probably need to start smaller on your magic so that you can learn that skill of casting a spell and letting it manifest, casting a spell and letting it manifest. That's why it's magic. Is because things manifest sometimes in very unusual ways. Sometimes things manifest in ways that you weren't expecting. Sometimes it seems like it would have happened even without magic. That's very common. But you know better because you know that you weren't pushing the river there. You were just allowing it to happen. When you're starting out, you do need to start small in order to build that will, in order to build that faith, in order to build that imagination, meaning that ability to open your mind to the fact that things can happen in ways that you're not expecting. Yeah, you don't see how that's possible, but that's the point. Because with magic, you're expanding your ability about what is possible. And part of magic is being surprised at the way things do manifest. That's always my favorite part. Is like, I wonder how this is going to come about. Not, now I'm going to go make this happen. You see the difference? I wonder how this is going to manifest versus, well, now that I've done that spell, that little exercise that's really meaningless, I'm just going to go make it happen. That's a lot of extra work we put on ourselves. Why bother with the candles and the talismans and the perfumes and the rituals and the timing and all of that stuff if all you're going to do is just go do your own thing your own way anyway and make it happen just like you would without it? A lot of people think that magic is nothing more than self-motivation. Well, you don't need all that for self-motivation. You can just write affirmations to get self-motivation. And that's fine too. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, a lot of times, self-motivation is all you need, and you don't need magic, in which case, go for it. But if you're looking at manifesting something that's just maybe a little bit beyond your sphere of influence, you're going to have to get used to is casting a spell and working magic means that you don't know how it's going to manifest. You don't know, but you know it will. That's what the faith part of our witch's pyramid is. I don't know how it's going to happen, but I know it's going to. I have faith just like I have faith in the sun coming up tomorrow. Why? Because I've worked so many spells and I know how this works. So that's why we start a little bit smaller when we're beginning in order to build up that faith. But you don't build up that faith by saying, well, I'm going to do the spell and the spell probably won't really matter, so I'm just going to go do it myself. That's not how you build up faith. You build up faith by working your spell properly and saying, now I'm going to let it go. I don't know how it's going to manifest, but I'm excited to see. And then I'm going to put it out of my mind. And then like Murphy says, you mentioned Joseph Murphy, it manifests like a toast popping out of a toaster. When you least expect it, you put it out of your mind and then it does manifest. And you say, wow, I would have never thought of it happening that way. And that comes back to your statement. I don't see how it could happen. What did you say? I don't see how a brand new computer could just land in your lap. Well, I've had brand new computers land in my lap many a time. That specific thing I've had happen. Now, it may not have actually landed in my lap, but it came to me. Those computers came to me in ways that I wouldn't have been able to figure out on my own because I did spells for them, for those computers. Sometimes it was just the money that came out of the blue, and I knew that it was earmarked for that computer. Sometimes it was the actual computer itself that came. So I've had cars that way. I don't know how I'm going to get this car, but I do need a new car. Well, what kind of car do I want? And then I would do a spell based on what I wanted rather than what I thought I could afford. And lo and behold, those cars manifested as well as the means for me to be able to afford those things. So it is a magical experience through and through, not just during the candle burning process, but also through the manifestation process. So it's very important to, yes, take inspired action when necessary. Sometimes that means if you're doing a spell for a new job, that you will be inspired to call a particular person or send your resume into a particular place. If you're an actor and you're doing a spell to get a role, you don't want necessarily a specific role because that's manipulative. But let's say you decided, I really want a lead role in a TV show, this or something better. And you do a spell for that. Yeah, you're going to do your normal auditions. You're always going to be doing that, but you'd be doing that anyway. But you get either this intuitive hit to go to this audition that you normally wouldn't go to, or somebody tells you, or somebody tells your agent about something that is just out of the blue. And then that's how your spell is manifesting. So yeah, you're going to have to follow up on that. Of course, you're not going to just say, well, no, I did my spell, so I don't have to take any action. No, that's silly. But at the same time, you're not going to kill the spell by saying, well, I did the spell, so I'm just going to do what I want to do when I want to do it and make it happen the way I think it should happen. Because then your spell has no place to breathe. So it's a balancing act that we have of taking inspired action, but allowing our minds to stay open and receptive to the manifestations happening in ways that we never could have thought possible. And that's what makes it magical. I hope that answers your question. It's a very good question, and I'm super glad you asked it. Thanks so much for listening today. Until next time, blessed be.